I figured what we'll do is for people trickling in, we're going to talk today about alignment and probably morality in gaming. And then maybe, we'll just see where it goes from there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Even like on Doug, it's really interesting, but I think it also like transcends into like other games too.
It really does. It really does. All right, hold on a minute. Let's
before we
can
start talking about it.
Yeah, we can do this. We can get this started here. Hold on.
Feel free to wait a little bit. I can go do something else and actually wake up first.
Oh, we're all good, man. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Give me a second. Welcome to the gaming workshop. Yeah, one day I'm gonna do something really cool with that. Like maybe. Welcome to the gaming workshop.
Just scream.
Yes.
I would advise it, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna cut all the cables.
Oh shit! The fucking sword. I was probably looking at it. Oh my god.
I know it's a little different, man, with the delay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the gaming workshop.
I also just wasn't looking, and then I just like happened to glance over. It's just a fucking sword. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh my goodness. That's exactly what we're doing. Talk about the drip. No, it's all.
That's hard. That's some Torchwood drip right there.
There you go. Hold on, that's for later.
We wanted to be able to put the orange T-shirt under the rider's jacket, like exactly what you're doing.
That would be cool, man. I would. Oh, you know what? I don't know why you. Well, you guys have the flaming torch bat, right?
Yes.
Oh, everybody, this is Cain the Messiah.
Hello.
From Torchwood, by the way. He's our special guest today.
Yes.
So that would have been really rad, actually. The rider jacket is not as open though. I think it's like zipped up, right? Like that.
I think one day they'll make it so you can like fold it, kind of like the baseball hat, like to where it's open. Because I don't think there's many more clothing items.
Well, if we had somebody, I guess I don't know if we do have anybody that works on textures to that degree, but it would have been pretty nice.
I think you definitely could. It's just like I see a lot of people suggesting like new clothes and stuff like that, but there's actually very few like things you can add into the game that won't like break the balance of like how many like break like the rarity. Like you can't just add more shirts, like 10 more shirts that spawn.
Oh, I see. Like it would. I see. Well, that's unfortunate, but I guess it is the limitations that we have. I'm kind of hoping, because it wasn't DayZ was kind of like a happy accident. Like it was just a mod that people really clung to, and then they.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole video about it. I've been playing. I never played Arma 2. I've been playing since like 2013, like the Stacy standalone. But there's a really good video on it by I think Soviet Wombo. He explained like, why it gained so much popularity and why it's like where it's at right now.
I'm gonna have to look it up because it is really interesting now. I mean, to think about it, because it wasn't like intentional. But what I'm hoping is, I don't know, at some point it would be nice if they redid the engine and that sort of thing, and actually did one on purpose from the beginning, and then and then have it be moddable and with the community in mind and that whole thing, and then it would be easier to maybe add different things and buildings and. Because it would be cool. It would be really cool. There are so many different things that you could do with this sandbox. And for anybody, anybody who's wondering, we're talking about DayZ. This is the DayZ game, and we are talking about the DayZ Underground server. That's DayZUnderground.com, in case you didn't know. And we were just talking about about the game in general. But today's topic we're going to get onto here in just a few minutes is going to be alignment and morality and other generalizations in gaming and how they pertain to Doug and other aspects of our lives. Because I will tell you, Cain, I have found that alignment over the years have really helped kind of keep in real life. If I look at my life, I can kind of tell different times in my lives when I sort of gravitated towards different I guess gaming alignments. It's kind of interesting how cut and dry they are, and yet how totally based on perspective they can be.
Yeah, they definitely are very dynamic. It's really hard, like it's a problem because originally they were for like D&D, but it's really hard to use them for like realistic characters because people are so dynamic and like they change so much. So it really is only accurate for like you can only ever really use it in a practical way for like small chunks in a person's life or like small little bits,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can kind of use it.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, the very first time I had ever heard alignment used as a part of, you know, like a person's background was in Dungeons and Dragons back in
Mhm.
the late 70s, early 80s. And when Dungeons and Dragons introduced this concept, basically, for anybody who doesn't know, alignments are basically kind of like I think of it like a compass rose. You know, it's like your character's true north, whatever, however they look at that life. It's like what morality balanced by how would you describe it? It's morality balanced by uh, not lawfulness, but rules, or not even really that.
Morality balanced by duty, like
Yeah,
duty.
by duty, right? Know what you said? Yeah, something like that. Well, basically, and the way it's portrayed in Dungeons and Dragons was that it was a very set perspective and outlook on life that your character had, whether you were, you know, more good or more evil, or whether, you know, you were more lawful or chaotic or somewhere in between. And it was very strict in that if you deviated from your alignment, you had negative consequences, which was supposed to reflect, oh, all the worry and all the dread of living differently than you always have before. If you were like had like a god or whatever who granted you abilities, they would start to shun you, and, you know, just the whole thing, until finally you made it through the other side, and then you were finally happy-go-lucky again with your new alignment, and everything was hunky-dory. But alignment has definitely changed over the years and morphed as people have tried to, as you put it, Cain, tried to bring it into more of a real life circumstance. And then we think about things where, like we had Harvey on a couple of weeks ago talking about playing the villain, where he's like, well, how do you know I'm not the you know, I'm the antagonist in my story, you know, or I'm the protagonist in my story and you're the antagonist. You know, it's kind of, it becomes a matter of perspective, whether or not, you know, there's good and evil and shades of gray, you know, this sort of thing.
Yeah, it definitely depends on what your morals are.
Right, but the alignment system like doesn't really reflect that, does it?
No, not really. There's been times where people have, well, I get because it's subjective even in how you define it. Because I've had like discussions, arguments with people on like what lawful really means or like what chaotic means. So like that itself is up to how people interpret it. But I interpret it like lawfulness as following any law, like following any like code to a T. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people will say that lawfulness only pertains to like good laws. So like, you know, if you can only be lawful if you don't steal, but if you steal, then you're not lawful. But my argument to that would be like, you know, you could be part of a thieves guild, and that would be, you know, lawful because you're following the laws of the thieves guild. It just includes stealing.
Mm-hmm. Right,
So
which would pertain more towards the morality of it as opposed to the
yeah,
guidelines, or how, which is kind of, it's, oh man, there's a really, I'm sure if we looked it up, there's got to be a really good word for it to describe that aspect of it, the lawful, neutral, and chaotic aspect of it. But I mean, you're absolutely right. People tend to, the whole point of alignment, okay, at least in by today's standards, is that it's supposed to be a generalization. I know the world shuns away from generalization. Sometimes it works out for us, and that's kind of what it's supposed to be. That's why you can say like there's good and there's evil, right? Yes, there are shades of gray, and a lot of times your motive, you know, helps define whether or not it's truly good or evil that you're doing. But you know, there's just a general societal concept. All right, we know, like, you know, murdering babies is evil. You know, we know that. We know, you know, nurturing them is good. I mean, you know, there's like some basic ideas, and I think that's kind of something that we all kind of have to agree to, just to understand the basic concepts of what we're
just
talking
for it to
about.
work at all.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah, because I mean, like if you're you know a psychopath who like you know eats babies or some
that's
shit,
right.
like you know you're not really like a good guy. I mean, you might be a good guy to yourself. That could be a good argument, but like you're not really like in the broader context of what we're talking about, you wouldn't be a good guy.
Right. Yeah, Mr. Blue, absolutely right, man. Lawful is just I follow guidelines or rules. That's exactly right. Maybe it's like a societal construct. This is the societal construct of it, or like how you view this. That is maybe
Yeah,
what the other aspect is. But
view
anyway,
view it through the lens that we live in, kind of.
that's true. Um, yeah. So I guess like in a way, all right. There's more like personal alignment, which is kind of how you view yourself, and maybe from your perspective. But then there's like a general overview alignment. Well, thank you for the follow. So, like, basically, I would say this is more obvious, maybe in the good and evil aspects, because again, if like you're doing something that you feel is good in the greater scheme of things, but what you're doing in general seems to be evil, then chances are people are just going to assume that you're evil, and and vice versa. If you're doing a lot of things that are obviously or overtly good, people are going to assume you're good. I kind of feel like when we're talking about factions, which are, the dedicated groups in DayZ Underground, we tend to include alignments to give kind of a general overview of what kind of attitude you might expect. Is that a fair description, you think?
Yeah, definitely. Like,
Okay.
yeah,
Be-
general,
yeah.
get you to the gist.
Because we get a lot of people who debate it and argue it all day long, and it's like, oh, you can't do something good if you're designated as evil. I call shenanigans. But it's not really, it's not really cut and dry, it's set in stone, but it's a guideline, it's a general overview. Like I like the way you and I use it in our different groups, because both of our groups are religious groups. And they, if you read the descriptions of the groups, they're both different in the sense of how like maybe they may treat others or view the world or what have you. Torchwood lives by a code, right? And that's what makes them lawful. But then they're neutral because their actions are defined by their code, right?
Right.
Like I want to make
And
sure
they're
I'm
not.
not.
Yeah, it's really weird, but essentially, yeah.
Okay. Well, I feel like Golgotha does the exact same thing. Although people will say, "Oh, but it's Christianity and you're talking about God, so you must be good."
Well, I
I
probably point them to
mean,
the Crusades.
right. It depends. It depends on how you act out your beliefs, and that's why I left it neutral, to be honest with you, so that he had some leniency,
Yeah.
to where he could strike back and not necessarily, in a way, like as an example, and not necessarily be crippled, out of his belief system, So, it's a tough world that we're living in,
Right.
in Shannara's. It's a tough world. But really, that's the reason why it's kind of it's neutral, but they're both lawful because they both have a set of guidelines or a code or laws or what have you that they live by. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I think defining like lawful and like chaotic is much easier than defining like the morality side of it, to be honest, because it's really easy whether like to determine whether or not somebody follows a code or like a group of laws or anything like that.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute then. How would you define the difference?
The difference between what, like lawful
Well,
and
like
chaotic?
yeah, between all three of them actually, lawful, neutral, and chaotic.
Well, lawful would just be somebody who, follows any kind of like code or like self-imposed law. It can be self-imposed or it can be imposed like due to like, whatever type of hierarchy you're in. But any code that you follow and that you don't deviate from, I think would make you lawful. So like in my group, for example, we have like our tenets, like our code that we're not allowed to deviate from whatsoever. So no
Mm-hmm.
matter what, I think that we're lawful. But that code doesn't necessarily have to be good either. I mean, your code can be to steal. Your code can be to like go out and murder, only go out and murder, right? So
Right.
that could be lawful. And if you don't, and if you deviate from that code, like okay, so I'd say if you deviate from that code sometimes, like if it's on a rare occasion or like as needed, then I
Mm-hmm.
would say you're neutral because you're like in between. But if you're chaotic, then I would say you don't follow a code at all, and you just kind of do what you want based on your own needs or whims or like desires.
Now, would you say that someone who's chaotic could never follow any rules or structure of any kind?
No, I think they could, but I don't think that it would limit them.
Right. Well, keep in mind there, you know, like Damn, for instance,
Mhm.
is chaotic evil, essentially, right? And it's because, but their general attitude towards everybody, like the way they would treat random people, is pretty chaotic, right?
Mhm.
So it begs to differ, like, or not beg to differ, but it begs the discussion though, because you know they're listed as chaotic evil, and they that's how they act when they meet other people, but within their own system they have an hierarchy, right? There's some sort of structure there where they have like war boys, and then I mean I don't know Dam's actual, you know, the structure. I haven't talked to them about that yet, but you know it's not just, you know,
Yeah, there
do
is some
whatever
hierarchy.
you want. So
Yeah.
but that would be like, you know, assuming like then using the factions as like what outsiders would view you as
Yeah, I
necessarily,
would.
right?
They do have a hierarchy. They have war boy, member, and then their leader. Unless they've changed it, that's what I've come to kind of know their hierarchy as.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of hierarchies like work. Like kind of like in most groups, it's like you have a recruit and then a member and then a leader.
Hmm.
They definitely do have that, but I would say that their rules that they do have. I mean, they can, feel free to like correct me if I'm wrong because we're kind of like speaking
Yeah,
on.
neither one of us are in Damn, but so, you know.
Right. But why I would think they're chaotic still, despite having a hierarchy, would be that they have they don't have rules in the sense that like these are the things you have to follow, and like these are moral. This is your moral compass that you have to adopt. It's more like if you don't do what I like, then I'm going to shoot you,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So it's kind of
And
like
I've been here longer and I'm tougher and stronger than you, so
yeah, exactly. It's
yeah,
not
well see, well
necessarily
then
like
now there
content.
you go. See, now that it makes sense in a very chaotic way, doesn't it? When you look at it that way.
Right. But I
See this,
mean,
you know,
yeah.
it's interesting. This is why I love these discussions, man, because it's like things can look one way, right? But when you really get down into it and break it down, you know, you discover that it's actually
Mhm.
something different and usually much simpler. Even, you know, like the Damn example. Uh, so I also find it weird when people think that just because that groups are like diametrically opposed, that they cannot get along in any way. Um, I often find that more interesting. I found because I've played games where like tabletop role playing games with friends and whatnot, where we've been the traditional good or neutral fighting evil. And I've also played where we've all pretty much been evil characters, you know, with like just some lawful and chaotic and neutral, but we were all evil. And I always found it interesting that no matter what other combinations we had, the only time that we couldn't work together or get along is when we were all evil. And that was because we all eventually killed each other or backstabbed each other or, you know, took advantage of each other. It was actually really fun. It was like like
That's cool.
playing, you know, against each other at the same time as we're playing against the DM and stuff. Um but yeah, it's like you know, any other time, even if somebody was evil in the group, like neutral evil or, you know, something, or chaotic evil, they were still able to get along with the group for the most part, at least long enough to get through a quest or something. So um I don't know. I find it interesting though that people think that you have to be at war with each other, or you have to despise each other just because you have a different outlook on life, which is essentially what alignment is, right?
Yeah, no, it is like how you operate and how you look at life and stuff like that. And you definitely don't have to fight for it. I mean, there are good groups who are pacifists and bad groups who just don't go out and kill people. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of you don't have to necessarily fight for your beliefs to hold them.
That's true, right? It's really the actions I think that people should have more of a problem with, because alignment. I mean, let's face it, alignment is definitely an OOC designation, right? I mean, there's no, you know, nobody's walking around, oh, I'm lawful good, you know, I go out and do this and this and this, you know, we just live our lives, you know, and people think of us what they will. So which is another, I think, interesting aspect of the alignment thing too, because I try to think of it, um I mean, I don't really dwell on it. Like when I first create a character, you know, I kind of think of, oh, I want to be a good guy or bad guy, you know, what kind of you know, what direction am I gonna steer
Mhm.
him in, you know? And then I come up with the basic background, and then, you know, I throw him into the world and let the world do to it what they will. But but yeah, I always try to think of it at first. I mean, when I thought of the Reverend Alessandro, I wanted him to be, you know, a basically good, decent person, you know. But then at the same time, it's like the world. piles its crap on him, you know, weighs him down a little bit. So he may not be as good as I wanted him to be at first or in the beginning. And so I kind of allow for these changes, but I find that some having like using an alignment, not as a strict, you know, guide, like or rule that I have to actually act a certain way, but just as a guideline. And like, you know, it's like, because sometimes I think people feel that way, right? Like, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, I'm a good person. If you have been a bad person or not, you know, necessarily the best person, and you're like, oh, I want to improve my life, you know, you tell yourself this over and over again. So it's the kind of like I don't know, resetting your compass when you start to play, and I start to think about things like, oh, well, you know, I wanted this guy to be good, so, you know, when I encounter people, you know, it kind of tailors the way I play. I don't know. Do you feel that way? Do you ever think about it? Like, you know, what the moral compass of your character when you're playing, and have to adjust or anything?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I do. I don't really think about it when I'm making the character. Usually, like my, you know, the things like alignment and like how he thinks about things are just kind of made up like on the way, like improvised. But I definitely do. I mean, you kind of have to a certain extent, consider how your character personally would react to a situation other than yourself. Because, like, in real life, you know, I'm a pretty good person, I like to think, right? And I'm not like killing people and stuff. But my character might view something as like an affront to himself and feel the need to, like, you know, kill someone or like do something like, you know, quote unquote evil because, you know, whatever reason he thinks of. But that's not necessarily reflective of um, how I'd react.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to consider. At least I feel like you do. Like if you're just separating yourself from the character, consider like how they would react to things and how their outlook is.
That's very good. I mean, because, you know, like when you're, especially, we're gonna talk to Harry Churches here in a couple of weeks about playing a good character and the challenges that come with it.
Really hard.
It is really hard, but part of it, as it pertains to alignment anyway, is like, you know, when you're playing a character, and then something bad happens to him, you know, all right, something bad happened to him, but over time, things continuously, you know, like I was talking about, it just kind of piles on. It's like, you know, it affects and changes your character, and I kind of feel like that's where having kind of an idea of, you know, a moral compass, you know, knowing where my character's true north is, helps me, because then it's like I'm thinking, well, I mean, gosh, you know, is he going to go out and retaliate, you know, and if he did, how would he go about doing it? I'm trying to think, well, all right, let's remember, you know, you know, he's going to be, you know, he wants to be like kind of lawful good, as an example, you know, so there are things he won't do because of that, you know, so it's like where my mind, imagination are going nuts, you know, all these different ways I could get back. And then it's like, would my character even want to get back at him, or would he just let it go? I mean, you know, and then you start to really think about how the world and your character interact with each other. It brings a whole new level of immersion, and it's partially because of having, you know, an idea of what alignment my character is, or what I want him to be.
Yeah, it's super interesting, especially with how like different characters can have so many like different alignments, and if you're playing those characters, it can be really like sometimes conflicting, especially like if your character has like an alignment or like a belief that directly contradicts what would be the most beneficial in a situation. Like if I know like the best way to get out of something out of character would be to act one way, my character, you know, just might not see it that way and have to act in another way that might, you know, even make it harder on myself. So it's like it's just a matter of separating yourself.
So that's an excellent point. We've talked on the show previously about, you know, in character versus out of character, and making in character decisions that were unwise based on out of character information. And that's an excellent point. Alignment, or having that moral compass, you know, for your character, really does help in situations like that, because there are times where it's just like, you know, I led myself into danger because, you know, playing Alessandro, I led him into danger knowing that the people he was interacting with were dangerous.
Right.
But he's the kind of person to where, you know, he would help them anyway, in the hopes that they would react differently to him, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's because he's, you know, a pretty good guy. So he would do that. And now it's like rough because people, might think they could take advantage of him or whatnot. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see what kind of a hit his moral compass takes. What kind of when his moral compass gets DayZ'd. We'll see what that does to him.
Yeah, it's like fucked on like every time people. Yeah.
But no, it is helpful. It's helpful in keeping your orientation on your role play as well. Because I play Dread Pirate Boomer too. What's up, everybody in chat? And he's different as well. Right now, I think he's pretty well neutral. I haven't quite decided, but because that was one where I just started with a concept and was just playing a concept, and it's kind of taken off in a life of its own. But the idea was not to necessarily have to play a good person. Right. Because that gets old. And I'll tell everybody again, I've said it 100 times. If this is like your first or second character that you're thinking about making, I would seriously consider not going full good person. Because it's very difficult. Or altruistic, or, somebody who might want to run an aid station. I would say save that for 3 to 6 months in. Maybe. Yeah. Because by then you've experienced a lot more the game has to offer. It's hard. Yeah. It's super hard. It's very, very challenging. I love it now. It's hard for me to do anything different, which is why I'm glad I have another character concept to explore.
Yeah.
But again, it lets me play differently because he has a completely different set of morals and all of that. So thankfully I'm able to branch out now, and I'm not as because I was really starting to feel pretty restricted, and with a lot of the things that he sees, it's hard for me as a player to not want to react, the way a player would react. I've got to react the way my character would react, and it's that gets rough, man.
Yeah, I think being lawful at all can be really limiting, because we don't limit ourselves as much as like somebody like Black Cross or like you guys in Golgotha, but we limit ourselves more than somebody who is like chaotic and can kind of like do whatever they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think being lawful is limiting, and I think if you're being lawful good, that's like really, really hard. I think like being lawful good, somebody like Fireflies or somebody like Black Cross would probably be, well, not necessarily Black Cross, but like, well, yeah, kind of, yeah, Black Cross and like Fireflies and stuff would be really. I think they'd be like the second hardest. I think what would actually be the hardest would be playing a chaotic evil character, but a chaotic evil character that is really like enjoyable to interact with.
Mm-hmm.
Like being a good role player and being a good, giving people a good experience that they can walk away from and, have enjoyed the experience while still being chaotic evil. Because I think that's really, really difficult. Because it's easy to be like, just evil. You can kind of like kill people and fuck people up, but it's kind of hard to be evil, like rob someone, shake them down, and like, be evil to them and still make them enjoy the experience. I think that's really difficult. And the people who can do that are really good.
Yeah. There's no question about that at all. I don't want to say even just playing the extremes is difficult. It is, but because by that measure, almost anything could be considered, really difficult play, and a lot of it is. Because there's so many different aspects to role playing in general. When you put, you look at them all individually, it gets really tricky. Especially when conflict is involved. And then people are always, we judge each other because, that's what people do. And so sometimes you worry about that, and whatnot. It's like there's a lot of pressure for role playing in general, I've found.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I really think as far as alignment goes, and Doug, that people really, I think they do misunderstand the point of, I'm going to reiterate. I'm going to iterate it again because, here we are like 40 minutes into it. And new people have rolled in, but the idea of, at least in regards to a faction, right? When we use alignment to kind of describe our faction, is that's a general overview of what typical society would expect. You know what I mean? And it's also not set in stone, but it's like, if you're known as being lawful good, for instance, then people are going to pretty much know that you usually do the right thing, and you follow some kind of laws or a code or something. That's kind of the impression that people should have when they hear the name of your group, if you're using an alignment system to describe it. Or, it's like, oh, right. I mean, and then the way you actually play it out all depends on a circumstance, a situational basis, right? It's not like a set law, like, oh, I put down chaotic evil, so I'm going to have to brutalize you and just be weird about it, not just do it whenever I want. I mean, that's not what that means at all. It's just, that's what, people probably expect of us. Yeah, I love that Damn is chaotic evil. I love that because that's exactly what I would expect of Damn. But in none of my encounters with Damn when I play on any of my characters so far have really been chaotic evil. I mean, it just depends on who I run into and when, and that fits chaotic, I guess. That would definitely fit the group as chaotic. But I don't, it's great because no, Damn. Like whenever I've encountered Damn, it's never been like really evil. I've been robbed a couple of times, but it's always been very light. And they've interacted with me in my characters and whatnot. It's not, I've not seen any, but their reputation, that's what it is. Their reputation precedes them. You see, and that's what alignment is. I would say it's your overall reputation. How about that?
Yeah, no, that's a definitely good perspective. I don't think it's necessarily true, but I think that most of the time they align really closely.
Mm-hmm. So what do I expect in a chaotic evil encounter to be? Well, I mean, you have to understand. All right, let's break this down a little bit, right? Yeah, it really could. I mean, because evil to me, all right, is the ultimate in self-serving, attitude. Mm-hmm. So it's basically whatever that person wants, whatever feels good, whatever directly to them, And for it to be chaotic, I mean, pretty much anything could happen. You can show up one day, they might rob you. The next day they might give you food. And the third day they might give you human meat and say it was real food. I mean, I don't know.
At times, being chaotic evil, it's in their best interest to be nice to someone.
That's it. Oh, what is that example, man? It's like, yeah, I mean, there's nothing to say that a chaotic person wouldn't run into an orphanage and save, a burning orphanage and save the children. There's nothing to say that they wouldn't do that. But why might they do that? Well, maybe they want to eat the children, or maybe they want to gain their trust so that they will grow up and then they could teach them their evil ways. Well, that would probably be a little more lawful, but I mean, there's all kinds of motivations that could be behind it, we really don't know. So, and the thing of it is like, now here's a question for you, because this is where we get into some nuances a little bit. But if we were to say, because I personally, just in real life, okay, I believe that selfishness really is the root of all evil. Like nobody sends for other people generally. That's not the general motivation. We send, we do it for ourselves, to be self-seeking. So I feel like that's really the core of being evil. But now here's the question though, because where does neutral fit in? Like if you, in the good evil arrangement, if you're right in the middle, then what's the, I mean, I guess it's, you're more prone to do things for others as well, or you're more prone to do, whatever suits your fancy.
Yeah, it is kind of, I mean, neutral in the sense of like like morality, or like
like immorality.
If being chaotic would be like you're willing to do anything to anybody to get what you want, then maybe neutral, like one version of neutral would be that you're only willing to go, as half as hard or as half as, down low as somebody, who's chaotic would be.
That's interesting. So it's
I do kind of agree with what Muffy said, by the way.
See, I'd argue evil is hurting people for fun. Neutral is hurting people to protect your own interests. That's interesting there. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Oh, I see. Oh, that's an interesting perspective. I like that. Yeah, where selfishness is actually neutral. Oh, see, now this makes more sense, because as I was saying it, in a real world sense, it's a little different. But when we're breaking it down into, definable categories, then yeah, this makes way more sense. Like selfishness is neutral, but abusing it is evil.
I agree with that a lot, actually.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Selfishness is like you're selfish. So like, if there's not a benefit for you to hurt somebody directly, then you're not going to do it because you're selfish. You're not focused on them. You're focused on yourself. But if you're like, and if you're going out to hurt somebody, and if hurting them is just something that happens, then I would say you're evil.
So let's look at it this way. Say like you're starving, right? And so you're gonna steal a loaf of bread, okay? And that's probably neutral. But if you steal a loaf of bread from a family and that's the last thing they had to eat, and you knew it, that would be more evil, wouldn't it? Because then you're doing it. You're indifferent to their suffering at your action.
I would say that'd be neutral, but leaning towards evil, even because you're starving, right? But if you weren't starving and you stole it anyways, just because
just to be a jerk, yeah,
yeah, or just because you might be starving down the road, or for some reason, I don't think that person should have that bread, then that would be evil.
See, now this is
looking out for yourself.
See, now this is going to be interesting because, if like you're running through the game, right, and you stumble upon somebody's improvised shed, which looks like it's out of the way, like it's supposed to be their own place, and there's like a bag of rice in it, and you're not starving, and then you take that rice, would that be kind of an evil act, you think? Or because you don't know if they're starving and they need it or whatever, but if you're not starving, then is that less neutral and more evil?
Well, it definitely want to be good.
No, it wouldn't be good. I thought kind of examining it with some in-game examples might be interesting because, of course, in real life it's different. You know what I mean? I'm opposed to stealing, obviously, but I'm also opposed to starving. And if for some reason, I needed to steal to not starve, I probably wouldn't starve. So, excuse me. But I don't see myself as an evil person, you know what I mean? And or even though that would probably be neutral, like I wouldn't be out trying to hurt other people to do it, you know what I'm saying? But I guess that's
neutral, but teetering towards evil if you did that, I think. Because I mean, people in real life do that. Like there's times where everybody does things that even if they're mostly neutral, it's as people, they do things that teeter, either way. They help somebody, like an old lady, or they like steal something they found, or like
that's interesting.
I don't think that would make them evil, but I think that would definitely be like, going towards the evil side. But I mean, hey, it's like sometimes that's necessary. That's why we're adaptable and neutral in the first place, right? So we can adapt to situations.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because it does depend on the circumstances, whether one act is evil, whether one is good, and that sort of thing. It really goes to show that you can't just set your character in stone and expect that. I mean, it would probably be pretty fun to play that way, and I'm sure that a lot of people do. But if you were playing like if you were, I don't know, man, in a real survival situation, it would really depend a lot on. Because on how willing you are to suffer, I guess, for your morality, I guess is what it comes down to. Because I would say that in real life, and certainly within regards to my own faith, that I would be expected to do without and to suffer and to expect that that God would provide. And looking back on my life, I could find examples where that was true and happened. But then again, we're also playing a game, and it's like, I guess if I was going to play my character very strict that way and expect that they were always going to live by this code, like playing Alessandro, for instance, I've never stolen from anybody. Like I've come across stashes and that sort of thing, but he's never taken from anybody's stash. I think the worst I've done is I've swapped out like a damaged steak knife or a damaged like kitchen knife for a pristine one, something like that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, who hasn't done that? I mean, come on, that's so minor. But no, it's just something that I've never done, with that character, and that it's interesting trying to live that way. I think, because again, it's like, oh wow, I'd really benefit from having that, but my character wouldn't take it, so I'll leave it. I don't know. And certainly in DayZ, everything's, things spawn and just whatnot. So everything's come around eventually, which is different than in real life.
We've
I think.
we've It's an interesting question I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
We had I don't know if you're familiar, but we had conflict with the Black Cross in character recently,
Right.
this past like couple of weeks or so, and a big kind of like discussion that we've had within our group is whether or not inaction is bad as action, like in how we view it in character, because we view inaction, well, like our stance on it officially now is that not fighting somebody who's evil makes you evil, but I'm curious how you see that, like how that would reflect on us or how it would reflect on them.
Now, what was your last part of the question?
I'm curious on how you think, like, have holding that stance of like not fighting somebody who's evil makes you evil. I'm curious how you think that reflects on us, or like another group who just may not want to fight somebody else.
See, I don't know, man. I don't know how I guess it would depend on the story and the reasons behind it, really.
Mhm.
Because if you're playing like a traditionally like altruistic group or something, who's pacifist or whatnot, and then there was like an evil rolling around or whatever, and you really didn't oppose it, I wouldn't really think of them as being evil.
Mhm.
At the same time, all right, I think maybe I see what you're talking about. Like if like you're allied with someone else, for instance, who's evil, does that make you evil? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Mm, kind of. It's like,
Or maybe I'm being too specific in that case. But
yeah, I mean, it's more general. So like, if I'm good generally and I help people out, would I be evil if I or what would my alignment be if I saw an evil occurring and did nothing to stop it? It's kind of
oh,
Trump.
I see.
So like, it didn't go out of your way or risk yourself to, or like conflict with your own morals to do good. Like, would you still
Right.
be good if you're
I
not
I
self-control in that
I
way?
think that act. Hey, what's up, Jan? I think that act would be more neutral because you're being selfish. You're not doing it to hurt somebody else. You're doing it for your own reasons, whether it's like self-preservation. So using like Muffy's example, I would say that's probably just a neutral action or decision because you don't want to get involved, but it's not like, oh, well, I'm not going to help them because I don't like them or I want bad things to happen to them. Now, if
Right.
that was the case, like then maybe then maybe it might be more evil in that case.
Mhm.
And again, we're just talking about the action. It doesn't one act or even a few actions doesn't necessarily define
Mhm.
somebody's character or a group's moral compass. It's really the overall everything. So I would have a hard time. I mean, I would have a hard time judging anybody on based on anything other than personal encounter anyway.
Right.
It's like it's interesting, for instance, like knowing uh all the the stories that I might have heard about Torchwood, like before my character met Torchwood, and then having my character meet Cain and members of Torchwood, and not really seeing how their reputation was anything like what his experiences have been with them thus far.
Mhm.
A little bit, a little bit. You know the situations we've played out, but so a little bit, but it's still it's not as balls to the wall as he was led to believe necessarily, or at least he
Right.
hasn't seen that yet. So I it's interesting. I base everything based on my character's experiences. So for me, it wouldn't matter if I had heard that, like, say, for instance, that you were like helping Dam and Dam was like eating orphans and you were helping them. I mean, if you were like going out and procuring the orphans and bringing them to them, then yeah, I would say that's evil.
That
But if you
actually.
were like, if that's the case, that wouldn't be good, because you're actively doing something. But if you know about it, like, I don't know, man, if like, here's an example. If somebody was to come to town and to be all like in need of assistance, Alessandro would offer it. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter who it is. And that doesn't make him evil. I would say, if anything, it makes him good because he's still trying to promote hope and fairness. Because here's his
Right.
take on it, for instance, is like if there's somebody that's obviously evil coming up to him, blood on his hands, literally, and everything, Alessandro is going to help him wash his hands and is going to help him give him hope because he feels like if he does that, then maybe that person will leave, and the next time he has that decision of hope versus hopelessness, he'll choose hope. And then maybe help shift that person into more of a good path, you know? That's kind of the way he looks at things. So I would look at it that way, really, on whether or not I help somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I agree. I agree out of character. In character, though, what you already just said is exactly what we're doing. I didn't know that other groups had done that before, like the Brotherhood.
Yeah.
But many groups saw them negatively because their approach was to kill or get rid of potential bad. Does that make them bad? That is exactly what we're doing. And I think that's why a lot of people see us negatively, because we're so, like, instead of helping people and kind of doing what, Alessandro would do, where he would help everybody and like be like, hopefully you'll choose hope next time, we usually just kill them.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's kind of
that's so interesting.
If we're killing evil.
That's so interesting story wise, for reasons I'm not going to get into just yet. But it's just really, it's neat. It's neat how we all come with our own stories and our own ideas, and then we let the game do what it does. Our characters get DayZ'd, and then there's something chewed up and spit out on the other side, but there's still, the stories all coalesce. It's really crazy, man. I mean, it's really the only way I could describe it without going into detail, but it's just, what a tangled web we weave. I don't know, something like that. It's crazy. But let's see. Yeah, I see what you're talking about with the Brotherhood. Yeah, see, I don't know. And again, it really depends on perspective. I would still think that given those circumstances, that it sounds like the Brotherhood might actually have been neutral, in my view, because they're willing to do what they have to do in order to get rid of the cannibals. You know what I mean? That seems more neutral to me, because they're not doing it. I don't know. I mean, maybe the individual members might enjoy killing, and this is just a way to direct it. You know what I mean? And that could be evil. Other people would be doing it because they see cannibalism as the great evil. It's the worst thing anybody could possibly do. And so I'm going to go out and stamp out this evil, and that makes them kind of good.
But definitely not like lawful good.
What's that? Oh.
I wouldn't say them. I mean, because that's basically what we do, right? I mean, we go out, we kill bad people, but we don't really care what gets in the way, or like what we have to do to get to that end. So we'll kill, we'll torture, we'll do whatever we got to do to bad people to get rid of the bad, right? But I would be hesitant to say that we're good because we do bad things for good reason.
What's up, Chip? Well, see, this is why it's interesting. This is why I wanted to have you on in particular too, because you'll see, you'll say things like that, where a lot of people will, like torture, for instance, is a very taboo subject, especially when you consider real life, and not to bring up other medium or whatnot, but I mean, people would watch 24 and they would watch Jack Bauer torture somebody to get the information to save millions. And most people would be okay with it, and some people would hold firm to their beliefs that it's evil no matter what. That's why it's like, who was it? Somebody was saying that alignment doesn't nuance well, and I tend to agree. I mean, because that's a very definable thing, torture. People, I mean, I think generally would expect that to be evil, but then there are circumstances where it is like a necessary evil. And I don't think that it necessarily, like doing something that would be considered evil does not necessarily make you an evil person in and of itself. And it goes back to the example of the orphanage, whether or not you save the babies in the burning orphanage, because again, an evil person could do that. And there's plenty of reasons why an evil person might do that. And it goes the other way as well. There are reasons why good people might do horrible things. Yeah. But then are they still good at the end of it? I guess that's kind of like, so much drama, so many stories have been written based on this hypothesis to begin with.
This is actually, I have a good example for you.
Sure.
Like a personal example. So we always set out to be a good group that toes the line of like neutrality and evil, but still does like good things, right? Mm-hmm. So when we were allied with Dam for like the first year of our group being made, we would help them kill people. We would bring people to their doorstep for them to kill and eat. We would, trick people and kill them, and like, basically we were just allies with Dam, like, and constantly helping them out. But the reason we did all of that was for our own survival, not only for our own survival, but because oftentimes with Dam, they would give us an opportunity, or we would have an opportunity to, when they were about to kill somebody, we were allowed to try to convert them and to try to save them. So they would essentially allow us the opportunity for, like, if they're about to cut someone's head off or kill someone, we would walk up and be like, hey, you're about to die, come with us instead, and we'll help you. We'll get
See,
you food, water, and help you out.
that's fantastic, man. I love that. All right, I love it.
Yeah, I'm curious
When
how. Get you curious? I see that. I don't hear churches like that.
yeah. All right. So if you don't mind, one of the things I don't talk about my whitelist application very often, although I did reread it just the other day, and it was a good read. I'm glad that I did, because it kind of reminded me of, I needed it to center myself, as to why I was here to enjoy the game as I was. But one of the things that I noticed when I was reading my whitelist application was, like, I went through these list of scenarios of different ways to play characters and whatnot. And it was interesting that you mentioned that, okay? Because specifically one of the ideas was, what if I played a good character who ended up running around with a bunch of, evil characters, and, like, say he was a doctor or something, and then it was like, would he stay with the evil people to try to have them come around, or to help their victims that they captured, or would he fight them? It's like, because I was trying to explore different possibilities, and that's certainly one. I mean, that's one reason why you might have somebody who is good hanging around with somebody who's evil. It could be to try to turn the evil person around. It could be to try to protect their victims when they get the chance. I mean, there's a lot of possibility. And by the way, these are very great and interesting storytelling hooks as well.
Oh, it was great. That was one of my favorite storylines I've ever been a part of. It was so cool.
Oh, I'm sure.
And Chip was correct. Yeah, Chip was. I mean, that's why right now, even, while we may morally oppose the Rangers, that's part of the reason why we, won't fight them directly often, or like we never do, because our history, like our group's history, because Chip was a part of Dam, and he was the one who facilitated that deal with Dam and Torchwood. And when Dam exiled Chip formed the Rangers. So now it's kind of like Rangers and Torchwood are kind of like neutral by default because of the deal we had prior.
Nice. That's just their attitudes towards each other. Because see, that's great too, because other people, there's also history. I mean, we can't ignore story and history and whatnot either. So there may be things, just to go back to the alignment thing, people might expect you to act a certain way towards a certain group based on opposing alignments. But at the same time, there are also individual characters within these groups who have specific opinions about other people that we don't know about. There's all this backstory, and because I had no idea of any of that, But if I had been like, well, why would he put up with this crap from Chip? He wouldn't put up with it from anybody else. There's the reason for that. You know what I mean? It's not just some random thing. It's, there's a reason for it. So that's really cool, man.
I've gone to like Rangers base. It's been a while since I have, but when they really hit their peak, so when Chip was exiled, he came to my new character, and we discussed that, because my predecessor, or like my other character, right, had been executed by Dam. So my new character, along with the rest of Torchwood, we both up in Civet, and Chip came to us and was basically like, hey, we know your leader got executed, but like, are we cool? And we allowed him to live, and we allowed him to create the Rangers, essentially. And then we fell, we became much weaker, and he became much stronger. And I went, and the Rangers are kind of like badass, right? Like, they rob people, kill, like, they don't really kill people that much, but they're pretty badass guys.
Yeah.
And so I, like, alone walked up to like Rangers base and was just kind of like acting like, an uncle who just walks in the house and is like, makes himself at home. And all of the new Rangers were really confused, because they were like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, why is he just in our base? But all the people that had been there before and seen all the history, they were like, okay, well, he's fine. He can walk in here and he can kind of do his thing.
That's pretty cool too.
Yeah, is very just how storylines. I mean, it's kind of getting off topic a little bit, but
Yeah. Well, it's still because we're still talking about alignment, morality, and really generalizations that we come to assume about characters. Anyway, so I mean, talking about how story affects that certainly is on topic, though. It's on the fringe, but it's still on topic because it does. It makes a difference. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot like real life too. I mean, you hear a reputation about somebody, and you get an expectation or a generalization of what you expect, a general idea of what you expect from them, and then you encounter them, and it's something totally different. So then it's like, well, what do you really think then?
yeah, bad news travels much farther than good news. I found.
Oh, absolutely, that's definitely true.
Yeah, out of character, people genuinely think we're just like an evil cult,
Yeah,
but like 99% of our playtime is just giving our things away and saving people and helping them out. But it's like the few bad things that we've done, well, while they are evil, like no, like for sure, like
yeah,
killing and torturing people, even if we feel they're wrong, is evil.
yeah.
Even though it's only like a handful of what we do, it still spreads a lot farther.
Well, that's interesting because it is true. Those are the stories that you hear. Well, they're certainly more dramatic as well.
Mm-hmm.
It makes for more interesting gossip to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about the negative stuff and all that. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about how this stuff kind of relates to my character and my playing, because I mean, again, when I'm playing the Reverend Alessandro, he's moral. He's got a strong moral compass, and things have been affecting him, and he's ready to take a more assertive approach, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go too far, certainly involving with any stories or any of that, but he's willing to take a more assertive approach now. But he would still consider himself good. Again, with Golgotha being neutral, lawful neutral, I mean, that's really also to give other people an opportunity to play the way they want to play. Um, I don't know, because I keep coming back to that because it's, a lot of, I mean, I've had several people mention that to me as an oddity, as why I didn't pick good, especially when my character tries to be good. It is generally considered a good character.
Right.
But it's also because the concept of the group was supposed to be very open to where people could come and just learn how to play on Doug and, become a custom, or even just learn to role play, any kind of in a, a judgment free kind of situation, is really the purpose of the group. And I didn't want to limit it to where, well, if you came and became a member of Golgotha, you had to have like religious role play. I didn't want it to be like that, because in a real church, you've got all kinds of people.
Right.
You've got people who are super dedicated and devoted, and you've got people who are, just showing up and are curious, and you've got everything in between. And I kind of wanted to reflect that a bit, and we were going to have, it's just the idea. If it was to go strong and be like a big group, then I would expect it to have all kinds of people with all kinds of backgrounds and who have all kinds of motivations. It's supposed to be neutral, and that's really why the group is neutral. But I could see where some people would be good and expect most people to be good. I guess it kind of where it makes sense then, the way I worked it out there. I don't know if it's going to stay a thing or not, but I know that it's fun to help people out of character understand all these different concepts and role playing and whatnot. So
yeah, and it's interesting that although we have the same alignment, we have it for kind of different reasons.
Because, right? Yeah,
we're neutral because we're good, but we do pretty fucked up things for the good, for what we see as a greater good. So it's like that's what makes us neutral. It's kind of like two extremes versus like neither.
Well, it's kind of fun because I had never, I don't think I've really vocalized it quite this way before. This is one thing I love about doing this show and streaming and talking about these things, because it kind of gets me to think of things in a new way. And especially in this, where we've got you're offering opinions and people in chat are, it's really wonderful. Because it's true. I think that's really encompasses what the neutrality of Golgotha is because we accept everybody, whether they're good or evil, in their heart, because our purpose is to help them.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. That's awesome. Yeah. And you guys do it because, you'll do what you have to do.
Right, like the Brotherhood, which is very interesting. I've never heard of that before. Like I've heard of the Brotherhood, but I didn't know that's what they did.
What,
So
the hunting cannibals and whatnot?
yeah, but I mean, I know groups have been good before, been hero groups, but I didn't know there had been groups before that kind of did what we're doing, like and like towed the line of like good and neutral because they did, you know, relatively bad things for
Right,
good
right.
reason, like executing cannibals. Whereas like, you know, a lawful good person might be like, you know, might give them another chance or try to put them on the path of redemption, where we would just be like, no, like you got to go.
That's interesting. So in talking about morality in DayZ, I think it begs discussion that, you know, we're talking about something still different than our world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's hard to say like how you would react to this is one thing I've learned in life. It's hard to say how you would react to a stressful situation until you've actually been in it, because you know, how we think rationally versus how we think instinctively are two completely different things at times. And I find that, like, because I think about it often, you know, ever since like watching The Walking Dead or getting into that, and you know, playing DayZ specifically, you know, how would I react in these kinds of circumstances? You know, would I still consider myself a good person, or would I be more neutral? You know, and it's really hard to say until you're actually in it. But that's one thing that I do try to keep in mind, that the world of DayZ is still a different world. And we have the benefit of, like, for instance, when you get killed, you respawn. And then we have the option of deciding whether our characters are permadead or not. And
Right.
so even just having that safety net, I guess, you know, where you get another chance, you know, if you want one, it kind of makes certain decision making different, you know, than if you only had one shot and you had to get it right or you were done. I try to keep that in mind as well, and I think that definitely, you know, there is, as good as I like to think I am at separating in character and out of character, it's really hard, you know, to forget that you're in a video game, you know what I mean, and that those mechanics are involved and whatnot.
Mr. Charwater introduced a very interesting question.
Yeah.
Is I think he was referencing an opinion that I stated a while ago, that I thought scribes were evil, and that's also an interesting, like, I think it's an interesting thing to talk about because obviously, you know, people disagree about that.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that I think they're evil is because they'll rob people and potentially kill people, but like for their own needs, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, would you see that as evil, or would you see it as like more neutral based on how you're defining neutral?
Well, based on what we've been talking about, I would say that they are probably more evil if they're willing to go through and kill everybody to get that light. You know what I'm saying? If they want that construction light bad enough, they're willing to kill everybody for it. That would be pretty evil, I would think.
Yeah. Oh, dude, Jalen, he used to there was a community member who used to write like he would make a graphic, like a graph of like all the groups and put them in their alignment slots, like what he thought their alignments were.
That's pretty interesting.
It was really cool.
That's kind of a good reality check for different groups as well, because it kind of, because I mean, you think of you're doing it one way or whatever, and then everybody else sees it differently. Then, you know, really how everybody else sees it is what's gonna, you know, be dominant in everybody's point of view, not the way you see it.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, you might, like, if you were really intending to be say like lawful neutral or whatever, and people saw you as more like lawful evil, then
Which
you might, that might give you pause to be like, well, you know, let's reflect and see why we're giving that image, you know, as opposed to, you know, the one we want to portray. But I mean, you know, well, go ahead.
We've actually been lawful good and lawful evil at different stages of our group.
Funny.
And at this point, like, if people think we're lawful evil, I enjoy meeting them in game because it's nice to give them a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Give them stuff or whatever, or give a very like ham-fisted approach. It, like, I mean, that's really was my goal, and like the people in my group's goal at the end was to be good, but like kind of like the Punisher, like have a very ham-fisted idea of justice. So like, you know, killing people if they're evil at all, or like, you know, helping people, but making it seem like we're almost robbing them in a way. So like we'll go up like, you know, all having guns in our hands and being like, here, take this. Like making them take a can of beans.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw when we interacted, like I think every time I've interacted with you, we've killed somebody.
Just, yeah, it has. And there's been for different reasons too. And it's really, it's interesting. You know, I can't wait for us to roleplay it some more because we're going to end up talking about this in game eventually. And it's going to be interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, because yeah, I would say that I could say in general, Alessandro doesn't see you guys as evil. You know what I mean? Because everything he's seen has been balanced. You know what I mean? He would definitely, if there was, I would say from my perspective, based on the things that my character has seen of you guys, that neutral fits pretty perfect. I mean, because he's seen you guys doing good things and he's seen you guys doing questionable things, but
right.
You know, for the most part, it's good. And it seems like even the questionable things are done with a good intention.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not random evil. In fact, you know, I would even go to as far to say, okay, because we always focus on good and evil and neutrality, right? And we figure like lawful and chaos are more definable. But there are also times where that aspect can be so strong in your character where it's, you know, because like for instance, Alessandro is very lawful. Like there wouldn't be anything else that he would do, I don't think, that wouldn't really be lawful, because that's how I look at it. You know, I use the Bible. It's easy for me because I've already got instructions, you know, on how I can kind of base his viewpoint on certain things. But you know, there are probably times when he would get along maybe with a lawful evil character easier than a chaotic good one, because of that, you know, because he's, yeah, I mean, it's like a cop, for instance, you know, well, at least would be able to communicate more effectively or something with somebody who is lawful but of a different, you know, morality, as opposed to somebody who's just chaotic and doesn't, you know, because sometimes those signals get crossed and don't make sense if you're looking at it differently. We
just try to avoid, like with the exception of Black Cross, because of the history of the groups, we just try to avoid like chaotic groups, because, well, not necessarily like avoid like interaction wise, but avoid in terms of like, you know, trying to like become allied with them or trying to like, you know, really like get close to them or anything like that, because we just don't understand it in character. Like we don't get it.
Right.
Like, if somebody's chaotic, we're like, how?
Yeah.
We don't understand it. We're like, why?
You're like, oh, you're lost, man. You're lost and confused.
Like, yeah, like Jesus. It's like, I don't even know. It's like you're at a dog park and everybody has leashes and there's just one fucking golden retriever running without a leash.
Yeah, it's going crazy.
But he's also not biting anybody, so it's even more confusing.
Yeah, that's an excellent way of looking at it, actually. That one dog at the dog park that's set free is going nuts.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Are an enigma to us.
Nice. Yeah, are the black sheep? I don't know anything about the black sheep, actually.
Very nice. I mean,
they're chaotic. Are they chaotic good or chaotic neutral?
I don't know. They're definitely not chaotic evil. They're chaotic neutral or good, because they help people. They have the Lovo camp where they give out food and stuff like that. But I would say they're neutral. I mean, well, that kind of brings us back to the question, like, if you help people, like you give out food and water and stuff like that, and you make like a camp, but you don't go out of your way to save other people, are you good or are you neutral? If you're not willing to like kind of like stick your own neck out.
I think that's more neutral, really. But you know, it depends, though. I mean, again, on the reason why too, because you know, this is where I have like, if you look up alignments, right, you're gonna get very broad or very specific examples, all right?
Yeah.
Like some people would say, like if you're lawful good, then you're like Superman. You know, where you're always gonna do the right thing.
I've used that comparison before.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, that's a little too rigid. That's the extreme case, because you can still be good, you know, and not help everybody and not sacrifice yourself for every cause. And,
yeah, you don't have to be absolute lawful good.
Right. Yeah. See, now that's funny, because here we're gonna add a third adjective to it, just to help make it more clear. We're gonna make it more clear by adding more crap on.
That's funny. And we could do that absolute moderate and
Yeah.
what would be the equivalent to nothing.
And then we'd have to break it down even further.
That'd be
Well,
sick.
I mean, are you super moderate, or are you just kind of moderate, or are you light moderate? What?
That's great. I mean, that'd be helpful. That would actually.
It really would, right?
Spectrum, right?
But man, it's like the last thing we need. Because then everybody would be debating it.
I don't think Vatos are evil.
Then we could go down and we could go like all these different types of actions. I mean, it's like, oh, it's rough. No, I wouldn't say Vatos are evil either. I mean, at least from what I've seen of them, they seem pretty neutral.
Like if we straddle the line between good and neutral, I think Vatos straddle evil and neutral.
Yeah. Now look, Chip has mentioned that Rangers are chaotic neutral. Now I know that we're gonna have a little delay and stuff, so it's kind of hard to have a long conversation. But that's a really good point, though. I mean, and that's also, Rangers are a good example also of a group that's chaotic in the way that they interact with the world, but their inner workings are not necessarily chaotic, right? Because don't the Rangers have a structure, an internal structure for their members, and do they have rules or anything like on how to live or or what rules of engagement are or any of that kind of stuff?
I don't know. Chip got to speak on that. I do think that from what I know, their structure is prospect, and then a ranger, and then a chief. And there's like several chiefs, like a council. So it's kind of similar to Dams almost. And I wouldn't really count, I mean, unless there's, unless he sheds light on it, I don't think that in itself would qualify them as lawful.
Oh, certainly not. But I mean, just because we were talking about how the alignments are generally what the outward, the way they interact with the world.
Oh, right. Yeah.
As opposed to how they interact with themselves. Because I think it's important to note that, because people will bring that up, and be like, how are you chaotic, man? You've got people, you've got a structure.
This is true. Yeah. I mean, they also might not claim to be.
There we go. So he says chaotic neutral because we value life, but our own more. So at the end of the day, we want to succeed, and we don't want to just kill the golden goose, so to speak. So as long as you aren't a threat, we'll just rob you and set you free. Right. See, there you go.
Yeah, that's what. It's the same as Vatos then. Like, neutral evil.
That's interesting. Because, I mean, he says also, as long as I can make a dime off of you without killing you, I will. That said, I won't leave you unable to survive yourself. See, what's funny is, and this is going to be another pop culture reference, but it sounds very Negan-like, and a lot of people think that the character Negan is supposed to be evil and all this. I never, even reading the graphic novel, never really saw that character as evil. If anybody's wondering, he's the kind of character who will walk in, tell you to give me half of your stuff or I'm going to kill you. I mean, it's very much like that. It's very neutral. It's like just kind of chaotic. It's like, either, because there's a consequence. He's not walking up and trying to kill you right away and take your stuff. That would be evil, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe he's being neutral because he's like, hey, let's go and we'll, give me half of your stuff. I want you to keep living because I want you to keep producing.
Well,
for me, so
if you define evil by abuse/selfishness, then wouldn't that make him more evil if he's trying to exploit people versus just putting them out of their misery?
Now maybe when he's, see, that's an interesting question too, because I was thinking about it as, well, how far is he willing to go to get his way? Well, obviously, he was willing to go well into the evil category to get what he wants, right? So that would definitely bring him more towards evil. But you went beyond that with your question though, really, because you're like, oh, well, the entire purpose of him allowing people to live is self-serving.
Yeah, it's not out of kindness.
See, that's a good point, man. And that is a difference, I would say, between the Saviors and the Rangers in this regard, because I don't really see, I don't know if Chip is, they really go that far. I mean, if they come up to rob you, right? If the Rangers come up to rob you and you were like, no, I won't do it, they'll kill you. I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So, but would that, I mean, that's interesting, man. This is kind of a cool circumstantial question here.
Do the Rangers let them live because they're being kind, or do they let them live because in killing them would
That's
eventually hurt them more.
Yeah.
Because that person might not be able to get them more loot, or that person might have friends who want vengeance.
Mm-hmm. It all comes down to the individual action at the time.
So I would say that's more evil then, if you're letting them live not out of like humanity, but just because they can get you more stuff, like exploiting.
Yeah, it's because it benefits you. That's fun. But of course, the people doing that are going to see themselves as good or neutral because they're like, hey, man, I'm just trying to survive. It doesn't really, your life or death doesn't matter to me. I'm just trying to survive. So that's interesting. I like this though, real quick. Chip points out that Andrew Lincoln, the guy who plays Rick in The Walking Dead, said that it's important to remember that we aren't the good guys. We're just the main storyline. That's such an overall excellent quote just for Doug in general. Honestly, ultimately there are no good guys or bad guys. We're all just the center of our own story.
So it's very interesting seeing, like, I mean, if you think about it in terms of numbers, the saviors were trying to monopolize and exploit the labor of like the other communities, right? And so Rick's group went to their outpost and killed them. And they killed like 40 or like more. They killed a lot.
They killed a bunch of them.
And Negan, in retaliation, didn't kill any of them. He only killed Glenn and Abraham.
That's right. And he was only going to kill one of them at first. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So.
Man, that's an interesting point too, man. Because he could have, he could have gone through and really crippled them if he had wanted.
And he would have been justified almost because.
Yeah, from that point of view, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to say, oh, well, one group started it, but then when the other group, engages in the same type of thing, I mean, it doesn't make them any better.
Yeah.
And in fact, it might even make them worse, or, at least on the same. See, what I loved, and I know we're getting way into The Walking Dead now, but I loved it. We were watching some of them during, because they always recap this, show previous seasons or whatever, leading up to new ones. And we saw the one where Michonne, it was like a what if. I loved it. That's exactly how I saw it, like a Marvel what if. It was a what if. And it was like, what if, Negan had found Michonne instead of, like Rick and them. And then it shows her if she was a savior and the whole thing, and it shows her perspective of it, and it's fantastic because it does exactly that. It takes all of their encounters and flips the perspective, so it makes them look like they were the good guys and all of it, and the Alexandrians were the bad guys. And I love it. I love it. If you haven't seen it, oh, you got to see it. It's a great episode. I forget what it is, but it was last season. It's good.
So another comparison. No, actually, could you link it to me if you want to?
Yeah. I'll figure out which episode it was and make sure so you can find it. It's so good.
So kind of joining back to Doug almost like
yeah.
Because we modeled our group after the Saviors and after like the Mandalorians from like Star Wars, but
that's interesting.
I'm finding an interesting comparison because if you look at it in terms of numbers, Rick's group killed like dozens of Negan's group, and Negan in retaliation only killed one.
Right.
But Negan and the Saviors are seen as like the bad guys. But I mean, from their perspective, Rick and his group are the bad guys because they killed dozens of them without really doing anything to them. So it's kind of like their perspectives like changing like that, and how someone's like good or bad really reminds me of how like groups view like other groups and stuff like that within Doug even. Because I mean, really, if you go way back, Saviors started it because they were exploiting other groups' labor. But they didn't do anything to Rick's group, so it's kind of like why did Rick's group feel the need to go after them? You know what I mean? Right. But that happens in Doug too. So if we see somebody fucking with I don't know, like Black Sheep, we have never really interacted. We have, but we've rarely interacted with Black Sheep. We have no obligation to go help them, but we would. Just because we feel like the person fucking with them is bad.
Right.
So, but that evil person would see us as the aggressors. Like somebody brought up earlier, like the Fireflies raided scribes, so does that make them evil? Like, no, I don't think so at all. Because even if scribes didn't hit Fireflies, even if it was quote unquote unprovoked, the Fireflies are being good by going out of their way to stop evil. Or what they perceive to be evil. Right?
That's certainly a way to look at it. It's fair. A fair way to look at it. I'll bring up again that like the difference. Chip clarified it a little bit. The difference between the Rangers and the Saviors would be like, say for instance, the Saviors would let you live in order for you to be productive for them to benefit off of it, whereas Chip will let you live because they value life. They just value their own lives more than yours, is the difference. And I do see that. I can see that as they're certainly being neutral. Whereas the Saviors would be more evil, you know, in the sense that they're letting you live just so that you can benefit them. Whereas, you know, but at the same time, see, the reason why he got a little confused there was because Chip was saying, well, we value life, you know, and we'll let you live, but we also don't want to kill you so that you can't, you know, you can't have more good stuff later for us to take. But if that's not, you know, if that's not the overriding motivation, then, you know, there's a difference.
I want you to respond to Mr. Tardwater.
Oh, not yet. Go ahead.
Fireflies are the only group on Doug that I can say with confidence that are a hero group.
Yeah.
The only one. Because all the other groups they might be good. Like they might build camps and help people, but almost none of them go out to like fight evil people and save people at the same time.
Well, I'll tell you my experience with the Fireflies are they came over to my aid station and I was planting seeds and they, without any hesitation whatsoever, picked up the I forget what is it called? The vegetative refuse and went and fertilized my garden. Yeah. And that to me is good. You've got to, very good. That is very good. Anybody who will just come along and be like, oh, let me fertilize all that for you, because that is like, especially with the vegetation, because that is such a pain in the butt. 3, you get 3, and then you got to stop and find another one, pick it up, and then you can go do 3. It's a time consuming process, man. And Harry Churches, man, he is the garden savior.
Despite us and the Fireflies having very, very similar, like almost to a T in terms of morality.
Yeah.
The main reason that we still have a kind of like conflict and that we're not like best buds is because they aren't willing to bend. Like they're like absolute lawful good. Yeah. Like they're not willing to go like, you know, do bad things for good reason. They're just like, we're helping people, we're saving people, fighting bad people. That's it. Like we're not going to sit there, torture people. We're not going to sit there and like hunt people indiscriminatory. Like they're like the Superman equivalent. Kind of.
They're like in my eyes, the Tick.
Right? Yeah.
You see the Tick? I love the Tick, man.
they fucking they really help people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yes, I do actually. I have an uplift desk, and right now I'm standing, and I do sit sometimes, but I find it's better for my circulation. I don't like to sit for like 3 or 4 hours at a time, but I do stand way more often than I should. I should actually alternate it a little more often. But here, I'll show off a little bit since it was actually a question. So yeah. So
well, Tardwater. I mean, your group is kind of evil, right? So it makes sense why Fireflies would fight you and still make them good. Like, which takes us back to what we said about like Rick's group. Like they attack the Saviors. From the Saviors' perspective, they're bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Saviors were exploiting the work of others, so Rick and his group are kind of justified.
Well, that's one thing that I don't really like using pop culture references for these kinds of things. But to be perfectly honest with you, they're extremely legitimate because a lot of people know the situations and whatnot behind it. But I would also say, like, for instance, this is a really good example. If anybody remembers the group, well, actually, almost every group that they encountered in The Walking Dead had a perspective. You know, the Terminus group, who was like capturing people who wouldn't they didn't think would fit in with their group and then eating them. Mm-hmm. Even they probably, I'm sure we know actually that they didn't see themselves as evil because they were a good group originally, who let people come into their camps and whatnot, and then they were taken over by, you know, some wolves in sheep clothing, right? And so now everything they did from that point forward, they were protecting themselves, but watching it from the outside, you know, they looked pretty evil, you know.
And they were bringing people in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like they were. If you ignore the implicit, you know, morality issue that comes with cannibalism, they were feeding people. And bringing people in, and they were helping people. Probably helping more people than they were eating. Because I mean, if you're desperate and starving and you're about to die and your family's with you, you're not going to think twice about chowing down some long pork.
Exactly. It's
Uh,
just it's interesting, man. I love the whole perspective thing. You know, it gets confusing and conflicting, but really, I feel like if people, when in relation to Doug, right, and as far as alignment and morality goes,
mm,
if you're really just focused on, I hate to say it like this because it almost sounds like, you know, you're talking to your children, but if you're focused on yourself and how you feel and how you act, you know, the things that you see other people do, you don't
mhm,
listen to the gossip, you don't listen to any of that, then in the terms of playing the game, you're gonna get along really well, like as far as you know, not having to feel like, well, my god, they said they're evil, why are they doing this good thing? None of that will matter, you know, when you're actually playing the game, because you'll be going on your characters' perspectives and their beliefs and the way their belief system colors the actions that they see. You know, really, that's kind of at the heart of role playing, you know, when it comes to alignment and that sort of thing anyway.
right.
But I think as individuals, you know, that's probably where we should be focused, and you know, and what our characters see.
Yeah,
So
and
I
I think very few groups are absolutist, as people usually assume for some reason.
right. I think chat is starting to disintegrate a little more.
That's okay.
Yeah, guys, you know, this isn't the place to hash out old issues. But I will tell you that again, when it comes right down to it, you know, the alignments that you see and that people portray it for their groups are kind of the way they expect their groups to be seen. Individually, I will tell you right now that there aren't many, you know, it's like the don't be a jerk rule. You know, we've got it's a pretty broad, but it's also very specific, to whereas it's broad in the sense that it's don't be a jerk as opposed to don't do
Two things.
500 different specific
Mhm.
things. But it doesn't mean that, like, oh well, if I shoot your character, I'm a jerk. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like it's still a matter of perspective. Like we get a pretty good idea of what it means, but you can't take it literally, right? But it's
Mhm.
not super broad that it means nothing. It's hard to describe situations like that, man. It's like white. It's like don't lie, but white lies are okay. You know, it's
Right.
trying to like explain that to a kid. It's like, well, if you're not lying to hurt somebody or to get away with something or to be, you know, evil, then it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, no, mommy,
Mhm.
you don't look fat in those jeans.
Right.
You know, it's like because you know, if you you know, that's almost self-preservation in a way.
Yeah, yeah, I
But you
agree.
know what I mean.
I agree,
That's
100%.
self-seeking, sure, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a necessity. That's not necessarily, stealing something because you're starving isn't nearly as bad as stealing something because you might be starving later,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
But
Yeah,
yeah, so you'll see, you know, that's something that you have to take into account. If somebody says they're good and you feel like you're not necessarily evil, and they come and they kick your butt because other people see you as evil, especially them, you're not going
right.
to think that group's good. I mean, we
No,
get it.
and
We get
yeah,
it, you know.
and from a perspective, like, I don't agree that we're evil, but I understand why people who haven't met us would think that, or why people who have met us, like, during really bad situations would think that, because, you know, we've killed people. Like, the people that I've shot probably don't think I'm very good, so they think I'm evil. So when people
Mhm.
say I'm evil, I'm just like, okay, well, hopefully next time I meet you, you can meet me on my 90% of good days, right?
There you go.
So if people are outside of just kind of like dealing with it, which I've kind of learned too, is if your alignment is one thing and people perceive it as another thing and start taking action against it because they think it's that other thing, I would suggest like make doing your damnedest basically in character to make sure that it's known on every level, out of character and in character, that that's no longer or never was what you were doing.
Hmm.
So like if I was really trying to be just good, like a lawful good absolutist,
Hmm.
then I would probably disavow anybody that is somewhat like in my group that may want to do bad things. Disavow them. I would only help good people. not even fight anybody. I basically become a pacifist, right? And I would make like posts and radio transitions and stuff like that, saying that I'm good. Like I disavow what we've done in our past. I want to turn a new leaf, and I want to be good. If you want to take, if you want to be aggressive with me because of my past, that's one thing. But from now on, I'm being good. Then you have more of an argument and more of a thing to be upset at if people continue to think you're evil. I think.
Yeah. That would make some sense as well. But again, I mean, like we said, it's all a matter of perspective, and how you're going. Oh my goodness.
People thought Carnival was good. Okay.
This is news to me. Yeah. So yeah, Bozo says people think Bozo or Carnival was good or neutral, and in fact, we probably were more neutral because we took into account that 1, it's a game, and 2, people have feelings, and 3, we're playing this in our free time, and people chalk up chaotic evil to killing and raiding, when truly good chaotic evil character thinks outside the box. Being evil doesn't mean killing everyone you see. Amen, brother. It means you don't care for the well-being of others and only care about your own self. See, that's a very good way to put it.
Wait, didn't the fucking clowns at one point have somebody like in a cage and like throw tomatoes at them?
Maybe.
I don't know if that's true. Don't quote me on that, but I could have.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. That's pretty bad.
No, it's being well, it depends on why. Now, how long you left them there. You were throwing food at them. Now, maybe if it was feces, that would be
yeah, it would be worse. They're not.
That would be worse.
You're not absolutely.
Well, see, there you go. Yeah, that's where you cross the line into abuse.
Right. What if they're starving?
See, that's where the tomatoes are good then, right? That makes you good for throwing tomatoes at them. I'm telling you, man. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I mean, let's see, because chat's livened up, man. Alignments are completely objective. Now, right now, Tardwater, I understand the whole point though of even having an alignment system in Doug, which again is completely optional, is that it's supposed to be a generalization. It's not supposed to be strict,
Yeah.
We've gone through the example of the evil character saving the orphans from the orphanage fire. There are reasons evil characters, there are evil reasons we've discussed. There are reasons that a lawful evil character would do it. There are reasons a chaotic evil character would do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's reasons a neutral evil character would do it. There's reasons why anybody would do it. I mean, think about the person who, for instance, has like a hero complex and wants to save people so they can be famous, right? And they start a fire. And then show up to save everybody. I mean, how does that fit?
Shit, man.
I mean, depending on who's looking at that, it could be any alignment. Right. He could have, he saved everybody, he's good. Oh, he started a fire, he's evil. Oh, he's neutral because he just did it for himself. I mean, I mean, who knows?
Right. Neutral's very broad as well. Like somebody like we're neutral, but we're much, much closer to good than we are to evil. And somebody could be neutral, like Rangers or like the Vatos. They're neutral, but they're much closer to evil. But I wouldn't say we're lawful good, and I wouldn't say they're chaotic evil. It's just kind of like, neutrality is more of a spectrum, I think. And yeah, I mean, the Black Cross is neutral.
Yeah. Now that's true, Buck. We were just talking about that a little while ago. Your allies do not dictate your alignment. So being friends with Joe Scrub doesn't make you chaotic good, but your own actions would have to back it up. That's exactly right.
That's true.
We were talking about
perception, though.
Well, we were talking about the example for anybody who wasn't listening before. Like, say, for instance, if you were, just hypothetically speaking, a doctor who was a good person, who believed in all these wonderful things about people and hope and everything else, who ends up running in with a group of bad people, and for some reason ends up hanging out with them, right? Do you hang out with them? Why does that good person hang out with the evil people? Is it to maybe try to persuade them into being more good, or is it to maybe help the evil group's victims that they injure? You're a doctor, you just want to help people.
I mean, that's what we did, right? With
Yeah.
Damn, people called us evil, and that was just something we put up with because it was like, yeah, I mean,
Murdered the
it
doctor.
can definitely be argued that we were evil, throwing
Yeah.
people in, giving humans for them to eat, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the only people that really saw us like being good were the people that we were able to save from them.
Yeah.
And that's really, I mean, if you're good and if you're neutral or good and you're trying to help people, then public perception won't really matter because you're going to help people either way, right? If you're doing it for your
Well,
perception, you're not really good.
that's an amazing point right there, because that's the epitome of being a good person, isn't it? Because you're not doing it for the accolades or for anybody to think of you a certain way. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And doing it for any other reason diminishes the goodness of it, doesn't it? So that's an excellent point right there. So really, for like for instance, with this, not to, jump into this argument here, but about, the fireflies and whether or not they're good, the fireflies really don't care what you think about whether or not you think they're good or what they're doing is good. They're going to do what they're doing because they believe it to be right.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter what you think.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
I do think scribes are evil. I mean, that's just my opinion, though. I mean, you can have another opinion. I disagree with you,
Mm-hmm.
but that's okay. I mean, it is, you are in the group, right? Like, people think we're evil, and I would counter that, like, to with my own opinion. But like, if they still want to believe that we're evil, despite the other things we've done, and just based on their own perceptions, and I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, and then honestly, that's the fun part about the whole alignment concept, anyway. And what we were trying to point out, that even though a group calls itself a certain alignment, doesn't mean that every member or every action they take is going to obviously fit in with that alignment, or even is going to fit in with it at all, because people are capable of acting outside of their normal selves to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how we make mistakes, and that's how we change and grow as people, is because we learn to act outside of our norm anyway, or extreme circumstances. I mean, that's why I like to point out, you really don't know what you're going to do in a stressful situation until you're actually been in that stressful situation. Right. And even then, the next one could still be different. There could still be extenuating circumstances that change the way you react the next time. That's just a fact of life. So in looking in terms of alignment, I mean, it's like, somebody could be good all the time, man, and then something tragic happen, they lose a loved one, and then they react out of vengeance and do something that's definitely not good. Yeah. Are they an evil person, or is it just an evil act brought on by extreme circumstances? I mean, I guess it's really up to that person to decide, and other people will make their own judgments, and that will never change. So,
yeah, and in character, what you might say is like, like where your spectrum is at, essentially, like, how far somebody has to go to be constituted as evil, would be hopefully different than what you would think is evil out of character. So like, I wouldn't say the Black Cross are evil out of character really at all, but in character, I kind of think they're like teetering towards that.
Yep. See, and I was trying to make the difference between real life good and evil versus in-game good and evil as well, but I don't know if that's really a fair distinction to make, because remember when I created Alessandro, his overriding question, or the purpose of his existence, was to determine whether or not like Jesus or God could withstand the apocalypse, and still matter, be relevant in the apocalypse. And one thing that I've come to learn is that it really just depends on whether or not somebody still believes in God. I think that ultimately that's going to be the answer to my question, is that as long as somebody believes, then yes, God will remain relevant, but once they stop belief, then no, it'll fade into nothingness. In this experiment kind of situation. And I feel like it's really the same way too, again, with just alignment and morality and whatnot. The things that we see that would be unquestionable today, like, look at it this way, not even something big and morale-like, right? Let's just say something like, would you ever eat out of a trash can, right? Well, like, the normal everyday person would be like, no, that's gross. Why the hell would I do that, But yeah, if you're in a situation where you're starving to death, you're going to lower your standards a little bit. You might actually eat out of the trash can.
Right.
And
your morality and like what you hold dear can change radically.
it really can. And people who haven't experienced that in real life sometimes don't have that perspective, which
Mm-hmm.
is good, because I mean, I'd hate for anybody to have that, to make that decision. I've had to make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know plenty of people who have. So it's like, it's rough. I don't want anybody to have to be there. But and when we're talking about alignment, especially if we're going to start getting, irritable with other people because they don't, we don't feel like they're living up to a standard that we have set for them. Let's
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind that they're living a character in this fictional setting. And we also have to keep in mind that the fictional setting in and of itself is going to gray morality and decision making to an extent, one degree or another. Especially because all of the emotions that we're talking about are super intense. It's all
Mm-hmm.
survival, and survival, and the things we'll do to survive as people. I mean, this is why I love this game, man.
Yep.
I love it. People are like, "Oh, I'm going to play myself in this game." Do it. Do it. Just be faithful to the setting. Be
My
faithful
first
to
character
it.
was just basically myself.
I mean, I'm all for. I haven't done that yet, but I'm all for it, man. I mean, how fun is that to see how far you would go in a survival situation? Would you, and to be truthful to yourself when you're playing it.
Well, I'm
Treat
in a
yourself
cult.
like a character,
A cult/religion.
I mean, there you go. Yeah, you'd start a cult. There you go.
There we go. 6 years in, I would do that in a Russian wasteland.
There you go.
Yeah, and then I
That's
get
it
executed by
exactly.
cannibals.
That's it. Yep. And that may happen, man.
Hey, I mean that's okay. I mean that's about. I mean 6 years. It's pretty long.
It is a long time. There's so much fun in this game. So many fun opportunities.
Yeah, you it's also really important. Like I feel like a lot of people in Doug and well, people who roleplay in general, like it's kind of a skill that you have to learn almost. I think, but sometimes people find it difficult to like when things happen to them in character, actually letting them affect their character in a realistic way and letting it change who they are and like who the character is. I feel like
Mhm.
that's a really interesting part of roleplay that a lot of people that well, probably more people than I know of, but that a lot of people don't really touch on or do that often.
I agree completely. It's character development.
Right,
I mean,
it's
in
very
a nutshell,
important.
is exactly what it is. Let me answer this question for Chip real quick, because he brought up a nice philosophical question for me. So he said, "So if the Reverend becomes the only believer and dies or turns his back on his faith, would he believe that God has died?" Now that's an interesting question. I don't know, because it's I have to temper that with a real life belief, and I believe that God exists regardless of whether or not we believe in God. All right, at all. But I would say, would as God's relevance on the earth necessarily, as far as humans would have anything to say about it? No, I don't think that we would carry it on. Is the thing. God would probably turn his back. The way I view it, is not is I don't know. I want to say it's not typical, but it is, depending on who you're talking to. But my personal belief system is that God exists without us, right? But in the sense of whether or not mankind would carry on, the belief in God, I don't think we would. If like all the Bibles were gone and no one had, ever heard of God, unless God came down and was like, "Hey, remember me?" Nobody would remember God. So yeah, as long as if there's like no record of it and it's gone, then it's gone.
Do you think that they'd make a new one, like a new version that is essentially like the same,
I don't know.
like as the Abraham? Because I think they would, just because I mean, there's so many different versions of like God, like as in like Yahweh.
Yeah.
But I think that even if all records and all memory of it was destroyed, that people would still create something very similar.
Oh yeah, yeah. I believe I agree with that. I mean, because but of course it depends on what God would want, and I imagine that God would want this whole thing to carry on because it's
Mhm.
happening for a reason. Whether or not you
Right.
believe in God, okay, is irrelevant for the purpose of this discussion, which is that if everything is happening for a reason, then chances are, even if we screwed it all up, it would continue to happen.
Yeah.
And I
Uh,
agree. That's probably what it would be. That's why I
mhm.
love, not to get too into religion, but one thing I love about religious discussions in real life and even in regards to this game is that you know, a lot of times it's all talking about the same thing. It's just using it. It's like, I believe that God uses different voices to talk to different people because we all hear things different
Right.
based on who we are, because we're all different people. Not everybody's going to hear a message the same way. So we hear it differently in a way that relates to us or fits in with us, to what that opens us up to it, is kind of how I believe it. But that's totally different discussion.
That's a good way to look at it.
Well, thanks. But yeah, it's, you know, it did help me come up with the purgatory thing, kind of thinking of it that way.
So cool.
But
I love religion roleplaying. It's really
thanks,
good. I don't know how
I
I
appreciate
would apply Chip's question to, like, you know, the light, because it's not really a deity. But
yeah,
it's funny. I don't know if you do this or if other, like, people who do religious roleplay do this, but like, we feel like the light is kind of like, you know, omnipresent, like it just exists outside of ourselves, but we even assign like its code to other people. So like, there are people like, oh man, who would be a good example? Like the fireflies. Like we believe a lot of the fireflies are enlightened, even if like they hate it. They don't like it. They're like fuck the light. I don't believe in that cult nonsense, right? But
yeah.
when we meet them and when we see them, we're like, yeah, you're enlightened. You follow the code, whether you acknowledge it or not. So
Thanks for
even
the
if all
follow.
of us died, we would still believe that somebody else would still be following the tenets, even if it's in like another form.
So that's interesting.
Mhm.
That kind of goes along with my real life belief system too. The way you guys look at it, yeah,
It's like
you
a
know,
homebrew religion.
yeah,
Great.
yeah. It's pretty interesting, and it definitely pertains to Doug because, you know, like even Alessandra's version of Christianity is still tempered by the apocalypse, and as far as the purgatory thing, because like I don't believe in purgatory in real life, you know, not that it's crazy or far-fetched. We're talking about religion here, but you know, I don't believe that there's a waiting area. I mean, I believe that's, you know, why in my faith, that's why Jesus died on the cross, was so that, you know, we could be saved without having to redeem ourselves. We don't have to go to a waiting place to prove ourselves. But I feel
Right.
like,
Very cool,
but Alessandro probably believed that before the apocalypse, you
Mhm.
know. And so now that they're, and I think I've made this pretty clear through the role play and stories and whatnot, but he believes that, you know, the rapture has come and gone. And then there's, if you know, there's Revelation speaks about a very vast period of time, which really, I feel like a lot of the Bible talks about time in a very different way than we perceive it. And so it gives him a lot of wiggle room, you know, in between these events that take place in Revelations, you know. So that's kind of where I was like, well, maybe after, you know, God came and took everybody away, maybe there is still an opportunity to prove yourself, you know, before. It's like, before you had all this blanket protection, now that's gone, you know. Like, so this is your last chance, get it right,
Love
because
it.
this is
Yeah.
it, you know. And so yeah, kind of, that's where all that came about, the whole purgatory thing, and why
Yeah, it's
it's not,
awesome.
it's based on real stuff, but it's not real to me. But you know, it's like,
It's
again,
feasible.
that's why I don't like to talk about, that's why I don't like to reference it as God or Jesus or any of that in game. It's the Lord, because the Lord is a very generic designator, you know. It can be
Right.
anyway. And so
I mean, I always joke around in character that it's basically the same thing but different words.
exactly
The
right.
and the light, and you know, the funny words we attached meaning to.
So I think this is also, it's definitely relevant, but it's a good discussion to have, about having religious role play in a game like this in the first place, because there are general rules. Like, people will comment on political things here and there, right? And but there's a line that gets drawn. You know, we're not going to be negative towards each other because of a viewpoint like that, or we're not supposed to. And the same is true of religion, because a religion is typically a taboo subject. But we do allow, if you think about it, we do allow politics in game, because each
Mhm.
factions, and they have political, you know, things going on in between them and all of that. So it makes sense to allow religion as well. But again, we're also kind of doing it, I don't know, I guess in good taste necessarily. Like, you
Yeah.
know, we're not running around mimicking specific religions in a negative light.
Yeah, and there have been people who've done that, and I'm pretty sure it's not allowed. Like if you were
Right.
to do it in bad taste and people knew about it, it'd be kind of like. I mean, you can do mostly anything on Dog actually, as long as it's in good taste. Like I've seen people play like
Hmm.
racist characters, but that are done in good taste. Well, it's very easy to do that in bad taste.
It is. I'll tell you, a lot of people don't understand this. First of all, I was a big fan of Michael Rooker. I've actually got his autograph. I used to
Oh
have
hell
displayed
yeah,
behind me. It's put away right now.
I love him. That's
You know
great.
immediately where this is going too, I'm
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Merle from The Walking Dead is one of my favorite characters from that whole
Hmm.
series, and
Me too.
he's racist and he's awful, and he's not the kind of person that you really want to be or be around or anything. At first, he kind of becomes that. He's like an anti-hero in a way, you know. Eventually, he kind of comes back around a little bit. Whether or not he ever really redeems himself is kind of a matter of perspective. I don't, I don't know. I think he was on his way. But I loved his character because his character was like an undeniable I don't want to say evil, but he was definitely an antagonist, you know what I'm saying, for pretty much anybody who ever knew him. Probably.
Right. Yeah.
But
Sounds fun guy.
he wasn't like so hopeless that it was like you had to hate him all the time. It was just like it's just weird. He was one of those characters. He's like somebody you could know in real life. Is
Yeah.
the thing. He was
I,
like a
I,
real life person.
Yeah, very
It's
real,
like,
especially like in the South, like where it took place. Like I could
yeah.
really see somebody from Merle like being around.
Yeah, definitely. But he had his own moral code, and by the end of it, yeah, a tragic villain. That's a great way to explain it.
That
Definitely
is
anti-hero. But it is what it is. He's the kind of person who could ultimately do the right thing, but you'll never expect it from him,
right, and
until the end.
it's.
So,
I think it's also a good way to even look at kind of racist people. Not all of them, right, but a lot of racist people in real life, because like their actions and how they perceive the world and how they carry themselves and everything they kind of like stand for is evil in all facets. But
mhm.
it's also like because I personally don't have any like hate for somebody who is like racist. I have hate for their actions and how they think, but not necessarily for them, because for somebody who has such a kind of twisted world belief, I feel more petty for them than anything. And I felt that from Merle as well, like just as a
There you go.
character. Because obviously for him to have this worldview and for him to be this for him to be at that place on that kind of like dark path for so long, he must have, been pushed there. Because I don't think any human
Hmm.
is born, like bad like that, or like, unless it's like a really bad psychopath or anything. Like I don't think humans are really born evil.
Right.
So I think
I
something must
agree
have
with that.
happened.
I
Yeah,
agree with
something
that
must have
as well.
happened. So I feel pity for him.
I think that we're all very selfish. We're born selfish, I think,
Right.
more than anything else. But that's more of a like a self-preservation type of thing. That's why you've got kids. They have to be taught to share, and things like that, because it's like, for everything is self-centered. But yeah, I don't think people are going necessarily, oh, they look different than me, I hate them. I think they're, that's learned for sure. And I think that mainly it's or it could even be not even somebody telling you. I like this discussion, by the way. I'm
Mhm.
not afraid of any of this, but it's not necessarily somebody telling you that somebody that looks like this is bad. It's like if the majority of your experiences encountering somebody who looks different than you, all right, is bad, then that's another way of automatically assuming
Yeah, it's tribalism.
that and it's tragic and it is sad. I mean, I could talk about it in very realistic way. When I was growing up, I
Mhm.
didn't have a lot of. I actually grew up a lot in Florida, and I didn't have a lot
Yeah,
of.
no, sure.
There wasn't a lot of racism in my immediate family. People teaching me to be racist towards people, but I did have a lot of experiences where there was literally, and I hate to put it this way, but literally a railroad track, and on the other side of the railroad track was the ghetto and where the poor people live, and people, we were not well off, but we weren't as bad off as in living in the ghetto. And
Right.
any encounter I had with people that lived on that side of the railroad tracks for a while was negative, and that's just the way it was, and almost everyone over there was black. All right,
Mhm.
these are facts, okay? Don't, whatever. And even to a point where even to a point, I'll tell this anecdote. No, it's just an anecdote, right? But we used to ride our bicycles around a lot when we used to play outside when I was a kid. It was this weird concept, right? But anyway, and we used to ride our bikes around, and I would leave my bike in the front yard. I ran inside to get on the phone, and I'm talking to someone on the phone, and all of a sudden, bang, 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 someone's banging on my door. And I come, and I must have been like 11. I want to say I was like 10 or 11. And I go run into the door, and there's this adult person. They're like, somebody just ran off with your bike, man. And I was like, what? And so I was like, which way did they go? And they pointed, and I went and I grabbed my dad's 10-speed, and I took off after him. I mean, this is my bike. If I lost my bike, my dad would have kicked my butt, man. It would have been bad.
Right.
So I'm racing off, down the street, right? And this person follows me in this car. The person, of course, is white. Yes, this is going to be relevant. Everybody knows how this is going to end up. I end up coming up on the bike, and yeah, it's a black kid on the bike. And I come up next to him, and I kick him off the bike, and he falls, and he gets off. And I get off, and I'm like, man, why did you do this to me? Why'd you take my bike, right? And what does he do? He goes, no, man. He goes, please. He goes, my brother talked me into it, and he's like, I'm sorry. I wouldn't normally do this. And I'm thinking about it, and I've got an older brother. And I've got an older brother who talks me into doing all kinds of stupid stuff. Because here I was about the same age as this kid. And I won't kid you, man. This guy gets out of his car. He follows him, get out of his car. He's like, man, why aren't you kicking that? And he's using the words. He's like, why aren't you kicking his ass? And all this other stuff. And I was like, dude, his brother just talked him into, it was just peer pressure, And I helped him up and everything. And I was like, look, man, just don't do this. You know what I'm saying? Don't act like this, And so the guy put my bike in his car, and we went back and all of this, and that was really the end of it. And for me at the time, it wasn't about whether this kid was black or white or anything else, man. It was like, this kid just stole my bike, and it was like, oh, and I can relate to him because here is a situation that I might have found myself in. It didn't have anything to do with what color he was or whether he had money or any of this other stuff. It was his brother had talked him into doing something really stupid. You know what I mean? So It's like, I don't know. I feel like I had kind of beneficial experiences in that way, to where most of the situations where I've encountered people and been in conflict with people have been in situations where I could relate to it and understand it just from a human aspect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I've never really had to go, oh, well, these people are different from me, so they're treating me badly. It's always been like, people suck. And so they're going to treat each other badly no matter what, And then I had to eventually learn that it wasn't all people that sucked. It was just like, we were all individuals, and we've all got these different moral compasses, bringing it all the way back around to alignment because we're good like that. But it does.
Yeah.
I mean, it's whatever, man. We're all just people.
Yeah, it's hard for me as a person, like,
gosh,
just in real life, like in my life, like, to have hate for anybody, because just like seeing people and being like, able to relate to people, like you said, with the kid on your bike and stuff like that, and having situations where I've related to people who have done like bad things. It's really hard once you like adopt that perspective to really hate anybody, because it's like you might hate what they do, but you have to just, if you've been in those situations, you have to confront the reality that, I don't think anybody chooses to be evil unless something's like wrong with them, like medically. And even then, like, it's, I mean, it's really their choice, like, to have that problem. Right. Like, it's just kind of, you can hate what they do, but understand that if somebody's doing something bad, or somebody is doing something that hurts other people, then something had to get them to the point where they thought that was acceptable or like a viable option, kind of like a railroad.
I have to tell you, I mean, that's a very mature way of looking at it. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. That's very well said. And I mean, unfortunately, sometimes it takes a really long time for people to wake up and realize that. And sometimes people will never realize that. And that's unfortunate, but
that's fucked up. Like, I'm pretty young, dude. Yeah. And there's people, like, I'm 19, and there's people that are like fucking like 30 or 40 or like older than me. And they are just very hateful people. Like that guy, guy who took his truck. Like, he was helping you, but I mean, I'm sure he had no problem like watching that kid, get beat up or whatever.
Oh, sure. Yeah. He would have stood there and just probably enjoyed it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, because he was definitely a hateful person. But then again, what experiences went through his life, that molded him and shaped him in that direction? I mean, there's no telling.
I'm also kind of privileged in a way to be able to sit back and say, I don't hate anybody in particular, and that I understand people's struggles, because I mean, that in itself is almost like a privilege that not everybody else, has. Like my railroad happened to, coincide with being able to look introspectively and, like, you know, empathetically to people, but other people might not be on that kind of railroad. Like, they might not have had an opportunity presented to them or been inclined to make a decision that would give them that perspective. So it's kind of like, you know, what can you do?
Well, it's interesting because you wouldn't really expect, you know, to us get real deep, especially into like sociology and that sort of thing here on the Gaming Workshop. But it really does relate. It really does relate. It relates in a lot of ways, man. But I mean, it's actually profound. Why would we limit whatever is profound is happening? But if you think about it, you mentioned that as privilege, and it's funny because a lot of people take that term to be something very negative, and I do it too, to be honest with you. If somebody says I'm privileged, I'm like, dude, what are you saying? You're saying like I've had some kind of advantage or hand up? Like I've had a crappy hard life, dude. I have no idea what you're talking about. But in the extent, like, here's an example. Like I've had the privilege of getting to know people in a very different and personal way than a lot of other people do. And in a way that is a privilege. That was a privilege. It was something that wasn't expected and something that isn't guaranteed, but something that was beneficial to me because it helps me to understand people and have more empathy for people and to be able to put myself in their position where, you know, easier, not all together, right? There's no way I'll understand what someone else's life experience is truly like. Just like there's no way I could really fully explain it in a way that people could be like, oh yeah, I've lived that dude's life now. You know, that would never happen. But at the same point, it's still a privilege in a sense, because I don't have, like, because you got to figure people who feel that way, right? Really, truly hateful people. It's a really strong burden to live that way because it's like you're living with like a lead sheet over your life. You know, it's just hatred and anger and all of that just weighs you down and holds you back. And it just does nothing but breed negativity. And so it's actually kind of a privilege in a way to not think that way and not live that way because it's right.
Yeah,
it's crazy how that works out, man. You know,
yeah. There's, I mean, you're used to your own way, like no matter what. So it's kind of like like no matter what kind of burdens you carry, like they're invisible to you because you can't understand, you know, how hard it is for somebody else to carry their burdens and how yours might compare.
That's it.
So it's kind of,
and that's why being privileged doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative thing. It's just, you don't even have to be aware of it to have it. It's just acknowledging it, you know. Sure, but, yeah, it could be, definitely. It could be.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, like, you know, I've had a lot of privileges and other people have privileges that I don't. So it's kind of like, but if you say like, because I've met people that are like, you know, I'm empathetic. I can understand that, you know, people aren't very, you know, people are less fortunate or whatever, but I just don't understand why they don't do this. Like, okay, well, if you're able to be empathetic to, you know, why they would be in that situation, then you should be able to understand that, you know, they are making the choices that are presented to them and that they can understand.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that I can't judge that person for thinking that because they haven't been faced in a situation where they have to think any differently, essentially.
That's right. And but now at the same time, it doesn't excuse everything that people do. You know, like people, if you're stealing for food, yes, you're stealing for food. That's not as bad as stealing for personal gain. But it, you know, we still have societal limits and whatnot. Thank you for that follow, Forrest. I appreciate it.
Right, and yeah,
and so
infringe is like, you know, happiness, right? Like,
right. But this all ties back around. By the way, this all ties back around to alignment and Doug and everything else because again, what are we talking about? We're talking about morality and we're talking about perception. And that's exactly what it's funny because we've been on point this entire time.
Yeah, it feels like
whether you realize it or not. No, we're really not. It's directly related to it, and how people perceive the things you do and Doug and all that. It's really funny, man. Look, I'm unfortunately, I know this is going really, really well, but I've got to wrap it up here because you know, it's got that time and everything. But Cain, man, look, man, I really appreciate having you on, and this is such. I really appreciate the. You know, I wasn't expecting an immature discussion, by the way, but I mean, seriously, to be able to have
Right.
a serious discussion about alignment, morality, and even getting into real life, I really appreciate just the way you handle yourself and this whole group, man. I really love it. Again,
I appreciate you having me. It was super
again
fun.
with this community, I'm telling you, man, we couldn't do it. We couldn't do this if this community wasn't as solid as it is. I mean,
Yeah,
people coming in and jumping in chat. I mean, it's been civil even with the disagreements. It still has been
it's like
civil.
really like a family because people argue all the time. But I'm sure if somebody else from another community came in was trying to, then everybody would be working together just fine. So
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. It's wonderful. So again, let me thank you for taking the time out and coming and hanging out with us, and for adding your insight. I feel it was a very, very beneficial discussion today. And no, please don't let me interrupt you.
Oh no, I wasn't. I was just saying that it was introspective. Yeah. No, I really appreciate you having me on. It was really fun.
Definitely, it even broadened my view a little bit in real life. I felt like I'd learned something new today, which is pretty good, or at least a new way to look at things. And that's really a big part of what the gaming workshop's about, actually. Not just we're not just talking about having fun, but we're talking about the way all these gaming these different things that we look at in gaming affect our real life as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the games we play reflect our reality in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and vice versa. I mean, it's fantastic. But again, guys, all right, we got to go. I appreciate you coming. Again, my schedule on the out screen, you would think I would just adjust this because it's really easy to do, but it's not quite right. I've changed. I don't do Sunday anymore. I'm doing Monday days instead. So you're going to see me on Monday, noon to 4. Now at Tuesdays, 2 to 4 for the gaming workshop, Wednesday evening, and then Friday again during the day. The rest of that's all right. So you guys will see that. Thanks again for Cain and for everybody who came and jumped into chat and for having a really good discussion today. Next week, we're going to be talking about Doug in general, the success of Doug, why it's lasted 6 years, and the way that it's going to continue to grow. We're going to have Buck with us, and it's going to be fun. And then after that, the following week, we're going to talk about playing the good guy with the one and only Harry Churches. It's going to be a great time. So everybody, thank you for coming. We'll see you again soon. Peace, everybody.
Bye-bye.